Hiya, I'm Ken and I'm an academic consultant. What I do is I help postgraduate international students with their dissertation and their theses. Are you a postgraduate student looking to harness the power of AI in your scoping review or your literature review in general? If so, then you're in a great place because in this video I will be sharing my personal experiences and the steps I took in conducting a comprehensive scoping review on the use of AI in qualitative research methods. Now, this video is about how I've conducted this scoping review with the assistance of AI, and I'll show you the steps I've taken and my thought processes throughout. I will run through my preliminary research up to the screening of the papers because that's where I am at the moment, and there's quite a lot to cover. So let's get started. This is the first video of a series that I want to do in relation to the scoping review. I want to show you my process from the start of planning this entire scoping review all the way to the end, including the writing, the publication as well. So look into the video description for links to the other videos. What I will do when all of the videos are up is I'll update all of the descriptions with the necessary links. I'll also put the videos in a playlist so that you can watch them in consecutive order and follow along with me through the entire journey of this research. Overall, this scoping review took me quite some time. I ran into a number of issues with the selection of the paper. The reason why I want to do this video is because I want to show students why preliminary research is so important and the kind of problems you're likely to run into, and how I think and how I try to get myself out of these problems and how I try to solve them. We often talk about how to use AI, but we don't usually examine the evidence on this and how it's being used currently. And in 2024, we have a number of studies that have emerged describing the use of AI in the research methods. So at the moment, there are a few things that I want to understand. I want to learn more about how researchers use AI in their published research. Some of the questions I wanted to answer are: how and where do researchers use AI in the published research? I want to know how it is done. I want to know what researchers use and how they use it. This will give us more understanding about what is considered acceptable within the academic environment, and with that we're able to incorporate them into our research design with appropriate evidence and citation as well to support the decisions that we have made within our own research methods, particularly surrounding the use of AI. We need to always deal with the fact that there are a lot of ethical issues and integrity issues when it comes to using AI. So if we have literature to support the use of AI for certain steps of our research, it will just make our research methods and our protocols so much stronger. Other questions that I want to know as well is: how do researchers describe their use of AI in their research? We want to know how to write about it and also how to describe its use so that we can do the same with the appropriate transparency and clarity in our dissertation and theses. Finally, I want to explore how can we do the same in our dissertations and our PhD. We want to know how to apply all of this information in the way that we plan and we propose our research and argue for its ethical soundness and formulate stronger arguments that we can defend to our supervisors and our examiners as well. To answer these questions, my first thought was, why not do a scoping review on the topic? Sounds like a crazy idea, but there has been very little comprehensive explanation about this, and the developments in the area has been so vast over the past few years, and there's been a great explosion of literature surrounding the use of AI within research as well since 2019. So a review of the literature is actually quite needed. A quick search on Google reviewed a few systematic reviews conducted on systematic reviews that have used AI. Some of this literature I've covered in a previous video about how we can use AI in our systematic reviews. There don't seem to be a lot about qualitative research especially. Now, my prior knowledge about this particular topic is that AI use in qualitative research is very tricky, as the way ideas are synthesized and data is analyzed, they are not using statistical methods. So I'm a bit curious about how these can work in qualitative research specifically. Additionally, there was a paper on the limitation of how AI can help with the theory generation, so I want to see how other researchers have managed to do this in their publications. As you can see, there's quite a lot of questions that's running through my head before I decide on a topic, and things look very messy at first. And I have a vague idea for the research, but there is still no clear structure at this point, nor does it look like I've even completed a first step. To begin, this scoping review is about how AI is used in healthcare qualitative research studies. The research objectives so far are, number one, to map the methodological characteristics of healthcare qualitative studies that use AI. Number two, to map the healthcare topics that use AI in the qualitative research methods. Number three, to describe how AI is used across healthcare qualitative research. And number four, to identify areas and explore reasons where AI is not used in healthcare qualitative research. The key purpose of this review is to explore how AI is used, and to do that I have to map and show across a variety of qualitative methods where and how it is used. Healthcare topics are also important because within this review what I can do is I can also explore which topics are more likely to use AI, which also suggests that there are certain health fields that may potentially be more open to the use of AI at the moment, within research particularly. Naturally, we also want to know how they use AI, what kind of AI they use, and how they work and how they impact the research process. Essentially, what I want to know is the strength of AI for qualitative researchers, and similarly, I also want to know how AI is not used as well. Now, this will tell me the limitations of AI for qualitative research. Now, at this point, I'm only laying out the skeleton of what this review is going to look like based on my very early knowledge about what the topic and what actually needs researching. I don't have clear key terms or inclusion-exclusion criteria or selection process. My job now is to learn more about this topic and what kinds of refinement this research requires. Everything here is tentative and will be refined further through a few rounds of searching. My preliminary research reviewed a lot of problems, which is what it's supposed to do anyway. So my first search that I tested on Scopus uses the term artificial intelligence, machine learning, and natural language processing, and all of their respective abbreviations. Now, I got these terms from my earlier Googling about the topic. I could have also used ChatGPT for this step to suggest appropriate key terms for this. I then used the Boolean operator and to combine with terms for qualitative research. Now, naturally, I searched the term qualitative, but since I'm searching abstracts and titles, authors may not call qualitative research as it is, but they may refer to the methodology directly. For example, grounded theory was used to blah, blah, blah. So I searched popular qualitative research methodologies. For example, grounded theory, ethnography, case study, phenomenology, narrative research. Another thing about abstracts is that they may not include a clear methodology as well. And authors may just mention that there were interviews conducted or thematic analysis was used. So I searched the typical qualitative research methods as well, such as interviews, focus groups, and observations. This search result resulted in far too many studies, so there's a need to narrow down my search parameters further. So the first thing I saw was that there is a spike in research publication since 2019. So that makes sense for me to narrow it down to 2019 to 2024 as the time period. There is more need to review the literature within this time period because there's so much literature that emerge, which also suggests that there are a lot of developments within the field. Where developments happen, it also means that we need to assess and also understand the degree of evidence and also how the field has changed over the course of this explosion of literature. So that's why we want to focus on this particular time period where you see a spike in the amount of literature about the topic. Additionally, I thought I should focus on the healthcare side of the literature because that's the interest of the research question, and also because the clients that I work for are typically healthcare students, and I also teach within healthcare studies as well. The way AI is used and the way qualitative research is conducted also differs according to the fields, so it is necessary to focus on one field of study. On PubMed, AI and qualitative research have their respective mesh terms, so I only searched those two with the AND Boolean operator, with the same year filters set as well. Now, I first need to know whether the review was set too broad or that there is indeed so many papers on the use of qualitative research using AI. So I have to read a small number of the abstracts from these searches. I was also thinking that there may be many duplicates as well because Scopus and PubMed, they both index healthcare literature. So there's a lot of chance for an overlap over here. The important thing to note is that Scopus also look into the social sciences and the health sciences as well, which is why I'm using Scopus on top of PubMed. Additionally, I was also using AS Review to help with the screening. So larger numbers may actually still be manageable. If you're interested in learning how AS Review works, watch my previous video about how AI can be used in your systematic reviews, and the link's on the top right now. I exported 22,000 abstracts into a CSV file. I removed 161 duplicates on Excel and then uploaded all of this into AS Review and started reading through some of the abstracts. At this point of the research, it is still very early days. I am not very clear about what kind of literature are going to emerge. I want to understand the search strategy and whether or not the search is actually appropriate at this point. The first thing I realized is that a lot of the papers were about qualitative research about the acceptability of AI within healthcare sciences. I still struggled to find the papers that were relevant to the review from the first 100 papers that I was looking through very randomly. And 22,000 was still a lot to wade through, even with the machine learning capabilities of AS Review. I'm also the only researcher without a research team here. So I need to make this more manageable as a researcher when you're thinking about or planning your PhD or your master's dissertation, where you're the only person on this entire research. I need to think about how am I going to make this review or this research more manageable for that one person to be able to deal with. I was struggling to find any relevant papers about how AI is used in qualitative research, so I was unable to train the machine learning system to help get started. Another issue was that many studies were about using AI to screen health and medical notes to develop predictors of suicide risk and other mental health issues for early detection. Also not the area of interest of this scoping review. The reason that this has happened was because I searched the term interviews. At the same time, I found something on Scopus called Scopus AI. So what I did was I went into Scopus AI and asked Scopus AI to recommend me some articles about AI being used in qualitative research. The generative AI gave me 4 relevant papers, mostly theoretical papers about how it can be used rather than empirical research, which I was interested in. But I highlighted the reference papers for reference training later on. At this point, reading these papers, I've also learned that I need to expand my AI search terms to include neural networks and deep learning because these are keywords within as well. These keywords did not emerge from my Google search previously, so I need to add them to my search terms. So this is what I've learned from this preliminary search. Number 1, remove interviews and focus group from the search terms because that's going to give me a lot of unrelated literature. Include neural network and deep learning into the search terms. Number 3, I need to think of ways to narrow the search even further, but I was running out of ideas. I considered narrowing down to a specific qualitative methodology, but that would mean that my research objective and the aim and the review question will be refined to a single research methodology, which then takes away that objective that I needed to see how AI is being used across all of the qualitative research methodologies. From reading the Scopus AI theoretical papers, a lot of the papers were about how AI can be used to develop theory and manage large amounts of qualitative data, presenting knowledge networks of ideas and how ideas are linked together. And it seems like it is mostly about using AI for qualitative analysis. Now, this then becomes very important for me later. So from the previous search, it seems like my scoping review was not actually working. My original intention to explore how AI is used across qualitative research methods is very difficult when there are too many papers, and it's difficult to screen all of this corpus of data. However, with the Scopus AI articles, it seems like there is research about this out there. So this research idea actually has got legs. However, because these studies were excluded because of my filters and because these studies were not from healthcare, I could not use them within my review. One of the ideas discussed in those theoretical papers was that there is a lot of stigma and ethical concerns about the use of AI in research. So a lot of its use is perhaps downplayed or omitted by researchers as well. So I phoned up another academic to discuss this issue, to see what his perspective was, and this is what he told me. 3 things. Number 1, I need to consider that a scoping review is inappropriate as a review method for this particular study. Perhaps a narrative review without a systematic search is suitable, where I can rely more heavily on reference chaining. This was a possibility and something that I considered as well at the start, but I wanted a scoping review because of the charting. I wanted to chart where the literature is at the moment. I thought that this particular step would be incredibly insightful for researchers, because what you can do with the scoping review is you can look across different research methodologies. You can say that this is the research method that I'm using. These are the research papers that have talked about the use of AI. You can directly refer to those papers or cite those papers within your own writing. Number 2, maybe I needed to search research method journals like Journal of Qualitative Research, since it is possibly where these methods may be discussed. This was a great idea. I told him that when I was looking at the journal list of the 22,000 papers, in your search filters, you can see all of the journals that are used within your selection, your search. I only saw field-specific journals where AI is more commonly used. There were no methodology journals in the list, which I thought was quite strange, but that can also be because of my own assumptions about this particular element as well, as to where people will publish their methodology or where people would talk about how they use AI in their research. I also need to narrow down from looking at all qualitative research, because search terms like qualitative was giving me far too many studies that were about qualitative studies about the use of AI in healthcare sciences. I was a bit reluctant, but it was a necessary thing to consider, because there's no other way to narrow down this review further at this stage. If you found the video educational and informative so far, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content like this. So this was the issue that I was presented with, and there are not many ways at this stage to narrow down a search further. The clearest reason why I am getting so many papers is because the review is far too broad, and that is something that I had to admit in my own scoping review. So moving forward, the next thing I tested was refining my search terms. So my refined search terms are now artificial intelligence, machine learning, and natural language processing, and all of the respective abbreviations like before, together with deep learning and neural network added to it. And remember how I said that there was a lot of focus on the use of AI on data analysis? Now I decided to narrow down to thematic analysis specifically, as influenced by the theoretical papers that I found on Scopus AI. So here are my search terms on Scopus and PubMed. My search resulted in 510 papers on Scopus and 204 on PubMed. I took some time to have a look at some of these articles on the first search, and I realized that I had to add more exclusion criteria. So I revised my inclusion and exclusion criteria, and this is what they look like at the moment. For my inclusion criteria, naturally I will be looking at qualitative research articles that use AI in the thematic analysis. I am also focusing on healthcare, medicine, and nursing research. I've also narrowed down the publication years, because with this new set of search terms, the spike in the publication actually only starts in 2021 to 2024. So I've narrowed it down further to only 3 years in this scoping review. And finally, I'm only looking at peer-reviewed articles, because I am only interested in understanding the published literature, and also because the purpose of this scoping review was to support other researchers in their citation and their use of evidence when it comes to supporting their decision to use AI in their research methods. I only want to look at higher quality papers. Exclusion criteria. I'm excluding papers that do not clearly indicate where AI is used in the thematic analysis, so they do not contribute much to this review. I also exclude literature review and bibliometric studies that use thematic analysis, because I only want to look at empirical literature. There were a lot of systematic reviews and other literature reviews that were using thematic analysis, but also using AI processes as well. So that is not what I'm interested in. I'm only interested in qualitative research. So with this small number of papers, this scoping review actually starts to come together. The next step after the selection would be then to export the search as CSV files to combine to a single spreadsheet. Then I'll remove the duplicates, and there were a total of 714 papers across the two databases. 132 were duplicates, and so therefore I removed them from my document, resulting in 582 papers. I then uploaded these 582 papers into AS Review. A random sample of 11 papers was reviewed, resulting in only 2 abstracts that were relevant and appeared to fit within the selection criteria, and 9 papers were irrelevant within the selection of 11 as well. So I'm moving on with my scoping review, but I'm only screening the papers. At this stage, I'm only looking at the title and the abstract of these articles that were part of my search. So this set of abstracts was then used to train the machine learning model. The next step for me is to review the abstracts and screen for relevance to this review and continue to search for relevant articles through this process. Before starting my review, I set a stopping criteria. As I reviewed papers as relevant or irrelevant to my scoping review, AS Review learns which papers are more likely to be relevant and move them up in the queue order to be presented to me. And that means that I am more likely to see papers that are going to be deemed relevant to my study, while irrelevant papers are going to be pushed down the order. That also means that as all of the relevant papers have been identified in the stack, the remainder papers are going to be increasingly less relevant, which means I can pretty much stop reviewing at a certain point. So following what other systematic reviews that use AS Review have done, I set myself a stopping criteria of 50 consecutive irrelevant papers. That means that when I got to a point where I see 50 consecutive papers that were considered irrelevant to the study, I will stop reviewing like that. Onto the actual selection, this took me about 2.5 days to screen the abstracts that I have. The first day I screened 100 abstracts and I had 54 relevant papers. The second day I screened 202 with 25 relevant, and the final day 85 papers with only 4 relevant papers. At this point I've reached my stopping criteria as well. In total, I reviewed 387 out of 582 papers, which is about 66% of the articles, and I found a total of 83 relevant records at the screening stage, which is 14% of the 582 papers. If you look at this recall graph, you can see that for the first 150 records that I've screened, there is a steep increase in the number of relevant articles, and then this starts to level off past that, which means that the machine learning is doing its job. Using AS Review saved me from reading 195 more abstracts, which would have taken me about another 8 more hours. This is the first time I'm incorporating it in my own scoping review as well, so I'm still learning how this all works. My next task is to source these 83 articles for the full text, read the papers, and select the relevant articles for the scoping review, which I've yet to do now. Number 1, preliminary research is very important. For me, it has revealed how impossibly broad my initial review question was. I assumed that there will be very limited research in this area, hence I wanted to look at all qualitative research studies, but quite clearly I was mistaken. I have also learned the keywords that I need to be searching and the parameters I need to set. I have spent about 3 or 4 days doing my preliminary research, and it has led me to a scoping review that is now far more feasible and far more focused than before. A lot of master's students I teach tend to skip this step despite my warning and end up proposing systematic reviews or scoping reviews that are far too broad just by looking at it. For topics that I'm not familiar with when I'm marking, I would do a quick search on the index database to see whether or not the proposed study is even feasible to begin with. The lack of preliminary research will be found out very quickly. Number 2, AS Review has helped me cut down time when screening, but it has also has its limitations. Not reviewing the remainder of the papers has left me wondering if there were more relevant papers that I've missed out. In fact, I'm also quite curious about this since it's the first time I'm using AS Review. So after the scoping review is done, I will actually go back and check just for my own knowledge. You also need to have found relevant articles to begin with to train the machine learning model. So if you don't do some of the manual screening first or haven't found any relevant articles from your search, like what happened previously, it is just not going to work. The stopping criteria is also quite a poorly researched area. In mine, I set it at 50 because my stack had 582 papers. Other systematic reviewers set it at 100 because they had a stack of thousands and thousands of papers. There was a research paper that recommended a 5-step process to determining a stopping criteria, but because of the limitations of the capabilities of AS Review, I was unable to apply some of these steps, but following their calculations, it is likely that the recommended stopping criteria will actually be below 50. So I've actually set a higher stopping criteria. Finally, I'm still a little concerned about this review. So far, I've only looked at abstracts and some of the full text of the articles. I am not seeing a lot of information about how AI systems are being used. I get a feeling that this is only going to be a very small number of papers that covered this, which threatens the value of this review, but it's too early to say at this moment. If you found today's discussion fascinating and you want to dive even deeper into the world of AI and academia, I would encourage you to check out my previous video on how AI can be used in systematic review dissertations and theses. In that video, we delve into practical strategies and insights for utilizing AI to speed up your systematic review or scoping review process. In the next video, I will continue reporting my scoping review method and discuss my experience of conducting it. Don't miss out on an opportunity to learn more and take the research to the next level. Head over to my previous video and let's continue this exciting journey together. Bye!